Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in. We here at Books and Books, an independently owned bookstore in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, are so delighted to welcome you to a virtual evening with Helen Benedict and Eyad Awwadawnan to discuss their new book, Map of Hope and Sorrow, Stories of Refugees Trapped in Greece, published by our friends at Footnote Press. A bit about these lovely authors. Helen Benedict, who has been writing about refugees for over 10 years, is a recipient of the 2021 Penn Gene Stein Grant for Literary Oral History and the Ida B. Wells Award for Bravery in Journalism. She is the author of 7 novels and 6 books of nonfiction, including the award-winning The Lonely Soldier, The Private War of Women Serving in Iraq, and the novel Wolf Season. Her writing inspired both a class action suit against the Pentagon on behalf of people sexually assaulted in the military and the 2012 Oscar-nominated documentary The Invisible War. She is a professor of journalism at Columbia University, New York. Eyad Awwadawnan, formerly a law student from Damascus, Syria, is a writer and poet currently living and working in Reykjavik, Iceland. During his 4 years in Greece, he worked as a cultural mediator, translator, and interpreter for various NGOs. He also published a featured article in Slate magazine detailing his escape from Syria. To moderate this evening's conversation, we're joined by Mansi Choksi, a graduate of the Columbia School of Journalism and 2-time Livingston Award finalist. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, The New Yorker, National Geographic, Harper's Magazine, The Atlantic, and more. She lives in Dubai with her husband and son. The Newlyweds is her first book. Just a quick reminder that throughout this evening's broadcast, you can post any questions you have below in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. We will be answering them at the end. Please order your copy of Map of Hope and Sorrow from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Mansi Choksi, and I'm the author of a book called The Newlyweds. It is such an honor to be here to discuss Map of Hope and Sorrow. And I want to start by thanking you for writing this book. It followed me for days after I finished it. There were parts that made me uncomfortable. There were parts that made me angry. Sometimes it filled me with despair, and sometimes it filled me with hope. This is a book that is that lingers in your mind for several days after reading it. And I wanna first start with asking you both why you decided to write this book. You are so careful about who gets control over their own narratives. There is so much dignity in the way that the book is presented, the way that it is structured, formatted, the gentle stepping in and out of the narrator, not interfering and not kind of trying to make sense of experiences that are private and that are so intensely personal. So I wanted to get a sense of why you decided to write this book in this particular way.
Yes. Should I start? Is that okay with you, Eyad? Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Benedict. Well, we had several goals, but the major overarching one was that we wanted to push back against the demonization and negative stereotyping of refugees that's been getting worse and worse and worse in the last few years, especially since 2016 and the election of Trump in the US. But it's happening all over the world. And we both felt for different reasons that we knew how unfair this is. And everybody in the book, of course, feels passionately the same. So we really wanted to push back with stories that show the lives of the people in the book in their entirety. That doesn't just pigeonhole them as refugees or pigeonhole them in the moment where they are experiencing trauma or where they're only in the camp, because of course everybody has a full life beyond that. They have childhoods, they have love lives, they have parents, they have neighbors, they have dreams, they have hopes, they have difficulties, they have happy moments. And so it was important. So that was one of the things in the book that was so important for us, was to give everybody the space to have their whole story, to tell their whole story. So that was a big part of it. Then there was another really big part of it. Maybe, yeah, you'd like to talk about that.
Like, there is two reasons. First of all, like, hi and thank you for having us. So I would start, like, after spending a few years in Greece, moving from a camp to another. I have met a lot of people who seems like as if they don't have enough knowledge about refugees, or like, so somehow this book is a way of telling them about who we are, about what we are facing, and also about to show the inhumane and the bad treatment there. There is other things also, like we wanted to show that we are refugees, no different than the others. We are like you. So we just wanted to show that refugee is like, when you are a refugee, that doesn't mean something bad, and you are not coming here to steal the country or to change the culture. There was a reason to come, and just to find safety and dignity. And there is nothing harm about this, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it too was that, especially I, as a white Western woman, really didn't want to do the traditional journalistic thing of telling people stories for them. So we both agreed that we thought it was really important to make the book so that people could tell the stories in their own words. So the book is unusual for nonfiction because it's a mixture of narrative journalism and oral history. So Eyad and I will set the scene, we'll explain how we met the person we're talking about, where they're living, what their backgrounds are, political backgrounds, and the sort of descriptions. And then we get off the page and allow people to talk about their stories in the way they want, in their own words, which we both felt was very important. It was also very important to the people we interviewed, because they really appreciated being given back the dignity and respect that had been taken away from them so much, but once they had been forced into being refugees by circumstances they couldn't help.
Yeah, for me, some of my favorite parts of the book are in the childhood sections of each of the characters. I love them. I could feel and sort of situate myself in their childhoods. So many aspects of it felt like I was reading memories of my own childhood, and it was that kind of. I don't think I've read something like that before, where there's such large sections of the book that are dedicated to just memories, happy, painful memories of a person's childhood, and it says so much about also not of the land that they're leaving behind, but also who they were when they came in, or they turned into refugees. Some of the stories were also difficult to read, especially the stories of the women, Asmahan and Mursal, the two women characters. Could you talk a little bit about them from the lens of a woman's experience of war, and how different it is, how vastly different it is from being a man, fleeing a difficult situation at home, but also being a refugee in a foreign land. Helen, you've interviewed survivors of sexual violence for your previous book, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about why how hard it is. I'm sure it's very hard to get them to recount painful memories, but why is this important work that we must keep doing?
Yeah. Well, very often when the news covers refugees, women don't get much of a voice, and sometimes it happens because they don't speak English as often as men speak English because they come from countries where they're denied the education, or because of cultural norms. They're staying at home, they're staying in the tent, or they're staying in the container, or they're afraid to go out because if they're alone, it's very dangerous often for women in camps. So I was really noticing how many news stories I was reading about refugees that left women out altogether. So I went in purposely at one point to just talk to women, because I also knew that most women who go through the journey of being a refugee and who flee war have been sexually assaulted on the way or before they left in the context of war. I mean, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women who are around the world is sexually assaulted anyway at some point in her lifetime. So they arrive at the camp already traumatized, and then they're in a situation that offers them no protection. I mean, one woman told me the only protection I have is a little padlock on the zipper of my tent. It was a joke, that kind of thing. So, and so just as there are certain men who will prey on women no matter what the circumstances are, as long as the opportunity presents itself. Rape is a crime of opportunity. So that's no different in camps than it is in the rest of the world. So, but the lack of services and the lack of protection is absolutely criminal, so I did want to bring attention to that. And then there are other issues that are specific to women, like health issues, or when they have children that they've got to look after, or their husbands or partners have been killed and they're left alone with children. And that's a terrible struggle as well. But in many ways, Eyad knows even more about this than I do because, he was living with it close up and he saw how it was for women. And because he and Asmahan are really close. So would you like to talk a bit more about what you saw for women they had to face?
As Helen mentioned, and there is a sentence in the book, I guess everyone will read it. It is a nightmare to be a woman in a place like that. So I lived in Samos camp for 1.5 years, almost. And the only way that women can protect herself by being in a tent, and the tent is out of the camp. So what kind of protection? Even when they insulted or sexual abused, there is no right, or even the police won't care about this. For Asmahan, she was living in the north of Thessaloniki in Nia Kavala. I met her for the first time there. She was really sick about everything. She was a pregnant woman at that time. There was no any specific special care for her case. So the only thing I would say that we were building our relationship by talking.
Yeah.
Some culture, let's say my culture, normally when you want to talk, especially about matters related to women, it is not that easy.
Yeah.
And they won't feel comfortable to share with you. But for Asmahan, she did not care about this. She wanted to tell the truth no matter what.
Yeah.
And she felt that her duty somehow is to show what is going, despite this is something forbidden or taboo. So for hours and hours we were talking and digging in memories, and before even thinking about writing this book, we were just talking about everything since she was a child and since she got married and become a refugee.
Yeah. Do you think that you being a man from the same culture made it harder or easier for her to open up to you? Was it a hindrance or something that helped her feel safer?
So I think I'm not. I won't say like I am good listening. Or the important thing between both of us was that we don't judge each other, no matter what. Like we listen as friends. So I make offer by listening to her and telling her also. So I would say that it is hard sometimes, but it depends on the person you are talking to
Right.
and
I
whether you
want
are.
go in. Sorry.
So it is also about the effort you do to make
I
the.
have to add though, he's got a gift as an interviewer. He's just he can't say this about himself, but I can say it, which is that he's just the kind of person people trust and open up to, including women, and not just Asmahan. I saw it with other people that we were talking to together. So sometimes. I think sometimes we have it from the outside of a culture. We have exaggerated notions about the strictures that surround behavior between men and women, and that as he just said, it does depend a lot on individuals and the circumstances and the personalities. So that was one of the reasons why I knew that Eyad would be a great co-author, because I saw that he was a gifted interviewer straight away when we were working together and he was translating for me, as well as seeing that he's a gifted writer, because he wrote the essay that became the preface of our book while he was in the camp and gave it to me. Sorry to stop you a minute, Mansi, but I have a feeling we need to set the scene a little bit for people who don't know about the book, and just explain that we are in the northern Aegean. We're on an island called Samos, which has the second biggest refugee camp in Greece. And at times it's been the worst refugee camp in the whole of Europe. It is it's worse than many refugee camps you will find in Africa, or even in some in Syria or Turkey. It's run so badly. So that's the setting of where we were. And we first met in 2018, and we kept up. Eyad was living there for a couple of years before he moved on to this other camp where he met Asmahan, and I kept going back for years, interviewing people who lived there, but also people who'd gone through other camps elsewhere and had eventually ended up in Athens. Just to give some setting so people understand the context. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super useful. I feel like we should have done that earlier. Thank you for doing that. I wanted to talk about large parts of this book are filled with moments of high drama. We have a smuggler that makes one of the characters, Hassan, take a shot of vodka and some anti-anxiety pills before he is asked to steer the boat, and there is just this sadness that you feel for the families that are on this boat, and just this realization about how cheap life is. A person who has never been on a boat before is being asked to take a shot of some strong alcohol, take a bunch of pills, and their lives are handed over to this person. You feel scared for not only Hassan but the families that he is steering along. One of the most chilling moments in the book was the moment when Mursal realizes that her mother is no longer following her. And when I was reading it, my stomach sank. I wanted to go inside the page and shake her and say, no, do not continue ahead, because these kind of moments always end badly. And when that does happen, when she realizes that they have crossed without her, just feel this sense of desperation. You really feel these visceral feelings when you're reading this book. But also a large part of this book it lingers in the mundanity of daily life. the long wait for ID cards, the long wait to visit the bathroom, the long wait for women to wait for it to be sunrise before they can use the bathroom, the long asylum wait, the long waits to get an asylum interview. And as Eyad writes in his preface, it was one of the most beautiful sentences in the book. For 10 months now, I have been waiting. I try to sleep to turn myself again into nothing. I wanted to ask you both about this aspect of how, of waiting. It's so hard to distill that into writing, but you've done such an amazing job of doing that. You really feel that sense of hopelessness as time wears on. Can you talk a little bit about, just the mundanity of being, of waiting as being a refugee?
Would you like to start, Helen?
No, I think this is a question for you, really. That's okay.
I would say, like, when you are surrounded in a place like camp, when you have nothing to do except waiting and waiting. So the only answer you receive, we have no news, just wait, just wait. So you try to do something, either by helping yourself at first or helping the others. So somehow it is healing to me and to the others. Like, I know a lot of people who were like having sleeping trouble, but even with this, they try to go out to the city. There is like was Samos volunteer center, when like they try to just be active as much as they can. So the waiting sometimes makes us lose our hope, but at the same time sometimes makes us feel stronger.
That's interesting. I didn't expect you to say that.
You see, like, my waiting there made me write my first article.
Yeah.
And with spending like hours in bed, I guess you know about the details of living in a container surrounded by a lot of people. Not just that, like with bed bugs too.
Right.
So sometimes waiting, it has a bad effect, but at the same time it builds you. As Marcel said, you will I think, Helen, you can say about that, talk about this.
Yeah. So yes, it's sort of, I think it does depend on the person and their own psychology. It can also depend on what kind of, whether they're there with a family or other people, or whether they're alone. The vast majority of people are there alone. And that's hard if you don't have anyone, or you've lost your whole family. Either they've been killed, or they've rejected you, or that, as some of the LGBTQ refugees I talked to, they had been disowned by their families. So they had nobody. And I think when you have nobody, it's much harder. But it is hard to be a young person full of vigor and hopes and drive and energy, and not be allowed to go to school, and not be allowed to work, and there's nothing to do. But you are thrown on your own devices, your own resources, as Eyad is saying. So some people can make something creative out of that. I was really struck with how many people volunteered for the NGOs, like Samos volunteers, because they'd rather work for no money than do nothing at all. Yeah. But there are a lot of people whose spirits and whose gumption that got them all the way there, they do get eroded by the weight, that, because it's really hard to escape from your mind going round and round and round over all the awful things that have happened to you and all the worries about what will happen to you. And that can really eat away at you, and unless you're very good at finding distractions. I think it's a huge help to be a writer, but not everybody is lucky enough to be a writer or an artist, be able to have that inner resource.
Yeah, it's almost as a way of processing the things that are happening to you, and it helps you, process things that are happening around you. You're right about that. I wanted to, talk to you a little bit about Hassan. To me, he was a character that I thought about for days after I finished the book. And there is just something so, I think his story, kind of hits at something that is so common, this idea of utilitarian masculinity. This idea that he has this sense of being a man, but he doesn't know what to do with it in his current situation. Somewhere earlier in the book, he says that he didn't like to be told what to do. And the way that he describes his childhood, his time in his homeland, are these big detailed moments of flawed authenticity. He gets caught with a porn clip. He forgets his cousin on the front line. There's just like this anger in him. He refuses to be hugged by his mother, and he just to me he sounds like so many men that I know that have no practice with the emotional vulnerability. In the end, he becomes a man without hope. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, just this sense of the men, the young men that are inside these camps that, have this deep internalized idea of their place in the world as men, and being rendered essentially useless by their time in the camp. Can you talk a little bit about their frustrations, and what that does to a man who has, fought to be where he is, and then to be forced to sit and wait.
I'm sure I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, but I am not sure that it's that different for men than women in that sense. But it's not as if women are not also frustrated and stopped from doing whatever they were wanting to do. And like Marsal, the young woman from Afghanistan you mentioned earlier, she was a top student. Right. She was the top student in her school. So much so that she was teaching other students even when she was as young as 16 and 17. She wanted to be a doctor, and her education was just cut off. So there is that I think it's something more to do with being young and full of vigor and then having nowhere to go, and that frustration is enormous than it is to do with gender. But yes, the majority of people, the majority of the refugees and asylum seekers were young men who should have been in school or should have been in university or should at least been working. Instead, were stuck in this long, endless limbo where they didn't know when it was going to end. So, what are your observations about that? Yeah, because you lived through it yourself.
I would say like a lot of us, as you mentioned before, especially like young people who comes and find themselves like surrounded in the camps without any family with them. Like they came with really big dreams. Like a lot, they said, we are coming to Europe to continue our study to achieve our goals, but suddenly they find themselves surrounded in a camp where they can do nothing except waiting, as we mentioned. So yeah, when you have this energy, and at the same time when you just face the reality that you cannot do anything, you will get some anger inside you.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as we mentioned, some people, they lost their hope and they swim back to Turkey and they said, I would like to die in Syria. It is better than being here, feeling nothing except like an animal kept to eat and sleep. That's it. So I would say sometimes it makes you feel really angry.
Yeah. No, I completely agree that this aspect of this feeling of waiting is not and being frustrated for being made to wait is not something that can be determined by gender. I completely agree with that. But what I think I wanted to get at was a lot of the men are not used to being vulnerable. And this is teaching them. These circumstances are teaching them are forcing them to be vulnerable. And I saw that a lot in Hassan when I read about it. He just really struggles with this idea. There are moments in his section of the book where he says, but I'm a terrible son, but I'm a terrible man. It's almost as if he is processing his trauma while he's talking to you. It was a really beautiful thing to see. He started off. It was almost as if there was a narrative arc in his section on his own. He came into the book being someone, and he left the book being someone else. It was just a really beautiful thing to see, especially because it was all in his words.
Yeah.
That was the beauty of it. That neither of you had to step in and give it polish it off, polish it in a way that would make it more consumable to a reader. It was just wonderful to see that. I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the choices that you made in terms of the ethics of reporting this. You were clear from the get-go that the traditional rules of journalism don't apply here, where if you pay a source, it can pollute the relationship between a source and a journalist. Because it feels sometimes worse to just watch things happen. I wanted to talk to you about how you navigated this. They're telling you about these hardships. They're telling you about, where, how they won't have somewhere to go in the next couple of hours. And just, telling you unimaginable, cruel things that are happening to them. At what point are you offering to help without offending them? I mean, you want to offer to help without offending them, but at what point do you stop, and at what point do you push? That's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about.
I think, Helen, you are the one who should start with this, since you are like professional professor.
Well, I think it's important to understand that we were both interviewing everybody in the book over years, and we got to know them extremely well. I mean, and in many cases, they were like in the cases of Hassan and Azmahan, we were friends with them before we even thought of doing the book. And we were already, they were already talking to us a lot about their stories, and in Eyad's case, exchanging stories. And so there was no offering of money out of the blue or anything like that. There was no paying people to talk to me, and I never did anything like that. But when you know someone well and they're living right on the edge, and like a phone number for a lawyer, or helping somebody find a place to live, or putting them in touch with an organization that would help them, or sending them money for a bus ticket, can make the difference between somebody sleeping on the street and having shelter, eating or not eating, or going to prison and not going to prison. Of course, what human being isn't going to do that? Yeah. And as I've been talking about that actually with my colleagues, my professional colleagues, I've discovered that most journalists who work with refugees or people in war, people in really extreme circumstances, help. They may not tell everybody else about it, but because it would be so cruel not to. But it's true that you never wanted to get to the point of it being transactional. And the reason, just to explain to readers who don't quite understand the philosophy behind this, is because, for example, sociologists always pay their sources. So it's a completely different approach. But the belief in journalism is that, if you pay people to tell you their stories, you're going to put them in an obligation to you that could tempt them either to feel like they have to tell you things they don't even want to tell you, that they owe you, or that they'll tell you things that they think you want to hear. Yeah. And or maybe they won't, but it's just a danger that they could, and it kind of pollutes the sort of the purer trust between two people. Of course, everyone is in the book for their own motivation. The motivation is they want the world to see them as real as the real human beings they are. And we were all on the same page as that. But I never push, to help. I offer when people clearly need it, and sometimes they say no thanks, I'll manage on my own. That happens sometimes. But I do it when instinctively I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't do it. That's my sort of guideline. And yeah, you've helped people too.
Yes, I just would like to add something also. Since the beginning, since Helen went to Samos, and since I met her, like a lot of my friends, they wanted to talk to her. Not because they are going to receive money or because she's going to pay. No, they just wanted to tell the truth about what is going there. So we never offered anything except like helping. For my case, I would say a lot of them when they want to go like to a doctor, and this is even before the book, I would help them, or to the police station. So this is kind of help what we can like do to each other as human.
Yeah.
And the first motivation for all of this, they just want to show the world what is going and who we are.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the first motivation.
Yeah. That
So
actually brings. Yeah. No, go ahead.
it
Go
just
ahead.
it wasn't like our relationship with them wasn't really like journalist and source. It was more like we are all partners and friends in this enterprise together to get your stories out there. That was
Yeah.
really that's a much more accurate way of looking at the way of what happened doing this book and what our relationships were.
Yeah, I mean that comes across in the way that the book has turned out. The What I said earlier, that there is just so much dignity in the way that these stories are presented. It's so rare to see, and it's such a gift. But I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. Now that the book is out in the world and people get to consume and to kind of read about the experiences of refugees in their own words, and with the full authentic lived experience right from their childhood to to the crises that they were fleeing, to settling into Europe. What do you hope that it makes people think about? What do you want them to leave feeling?
Would you like to mention about the email I sent to you today?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah. Like 1 month ago, I met like a couple from America who has no clue about refugees, about anything going here or in Europe, like in general. So after like having a chat, I told them about the book, and today I received an email from them, and they sent it to Helen. They were saying like, now I can know more about refugees.
How wonderful.
So the purpose of the book is just to tell the world that there is a crisis, but at the same time, there is a solution for that. As you have seen, that we are just not just pointing of the refugee crisis. Also, we are having we put some solutions, and based on experts, organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our last chapter is recommendations, both policies and what individuals can do. I think, yeah, I mean, that email was wonderful. The woman said, I think it was the woman who wrote it. She said she found it so gripping, she couldn't put it down, and it's really opened her eyes, and it was lovely. So of course we would love to have more people feel that way. But I think that we all have a kind of innate suspicion of people who aren't like us, who are the outsiders. And a lot of that is being manipulated by politicians today. to whip up hatred and suspicion and xenophobia and Islamophobia and racism and everything. And even if we consider ourselves very open-hearted people, we absorb some of that poison whether we want to or not. I hear it among some of my friends, especially the one that Eyad mentioned, these people are going to come over here and change my culture. That is said even among left-wing people all the time in Europe, especially I hear it, but I've heard it here too in the US. And I think if you read our book, you're not going to say that anymore. And then when you hear your friends say that, you can explain to them that's not what it's about at all. And that, we're all human beings and we all need and want the same things, and we can all help each other get them instead of seeing each other as enemies. So it may sound very polyamorous, but what else can you do in a world like we live in now except hold on to that ideal and try and propagate it.
Yeah. Thank you. That was great. I'm really thankful and honored that I get to be part of this discussion. It's been such an honor to read this book, to be able to discuss it with you both today. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Mansi. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Clearly, the journalism school did you well.
I have you to thank for that.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was really, really insightful. I just wanted to remind the audience that right now we'll be doing the Q&A. So any questions that you may have, please ask them below in the Ask the Question tab, and we'll be happy to answer them. So just wait for them to come in.
I was wondering while we're waiting if I could read a tiny bit from the book. Is there time?
Of course. Yes.
Okay. Because it relates to what we were just saying so directly. This is from Marcel, who is we mentioned before, who is the young woman from Afghanistan. She was 21 when I met her, and she and her family fled the Taliban in 2019. And she gave me this essay she written during her journey that is for all of us. It's addressed to all of us. Do you know about refugees' dreams? If our country was at peace, we would never leave. No one wishes to live in a tent or a camp. Everyone loves their home. Unfortunately, the Taliban came to our city and started fighting. Right before we left our country, we waited for the new year to come. But our new year opened with war and the sound of bombs, not balloons. That night we had no dinner, only tears. We come here to Europe because we hope to give our children a good life and a future. We want to wake up to the sound of clocks, not bombs. We want to sleep without fear. We want to hear only the sounds of our family's laughter. Refugees are not bad people. Please stop hating us. Just put yourself in our place. How would you feel if you were insulted every day on the bus? Would you be patient? If you look, you will see we are like you. Some people see refugees as homeless, nameless, unclean, uneducated, and criminal. Yes, we are homeless, but not hopeless. We are nameless, but not weak. If we are unclean, it is because we slept in the forest streets and tents, but we have clean hearts. If our crime is speaking up for our rights and freedom, yes, we are criminals. If you do not want to see any refugees or migrants, fine, but please do not insult us. Sometimes only one word or action from you can make us feel as if our whole life is in jail. My mum always tells me, just calling someone a donkey does not make them a donkey. calling us bad and unclean does not make us bad and unclean. Being a refugee means you are strong. You pass through a difficult, dangerous journey and still you are alive. You have hope. You have goals and dreams. As my mum also says, when you find yourself in a bad situation, just remember this. After every dark night, a beautiful morning will come.
Good morning.
That was beautiful. I actually had my own question. I know you guys mentioned that the interviews for this and the whole research for this book took over a few years. How many years exactly did it take?
Well, we met in 2018 and started talking to people together in 2018, and I was writing some articles out of that. And I was also researching a novel which is forthcoming, set in the refugee camp. But even though we hadn't thought of the book yet, we were already gathering material and meeting people, some of whom were in the book. But we didn't really get the idea for the book until 2020. But by that time, we already had a lot of material. So I would really count it from 2018. Yeah.
Wow.
And also, it is important to mention, I guess, that there are a lot of people who wanted to be part of the book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
We didn't have room to put them all in, especially because we wanted to give everybody the 3 chapters of, for their whole lives. So to do justice to them, we would have had many volumes if we put everyone in that we spent interviewing. I mean, this goes back actually to your earlier question, Mansi, about whether he had any trouble getting women to talk to him because he's a man. And actually, it turned out you interviewed more women than I did. You tended to be the one who interviewed the women, and I was interviewing the men, except for Marcel. So that was just a complete chance, but that's how it worked out. So I guess the answer is no, he didn't have any trouble. Yeah.
I think we have some questions that have come from the audience.
Questions from the audience.
Yeah.
So, Ayad, please tell us a little about your current life in Iceland.
So I am living here like for a couple of months. I just moved last November, and I would say that I'm planning to stay here forever. I'm working, and at the same time, I am planning to continue my study.
Wonderful.
Another one we have from Marissa. She asked, I was wondering what are some ways I can support refugees in Iceland? I'm currently living in Reykjavik too.
Oh,
So that's good.
Interesting. And nice. I think I would say integration, like making sure or like helping any center who tries to help refugee and integrate inside the society by either work, education. I think this is.
so do you remember the names of any organizations that the person can contact?
Yes, there is like an organization called the New in Iceland. Also, the Red Cross, the Icelandic Cross. Also, there is. I think I know the 2, and they are good.
Okay.
Could this person maybe contact you and you could at some point send some information?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. How could we arrange that? Do you know how? I mean, can the person contact you at the bookshop and you can put him or her in touch with Eyad?
I'm not sure. Maybe she can comment her her social media, so maybe you can reach out to her, or she can reach out through there. I'm not sure if you have social media.
Yeah, it would be an idea.
Yeah.
Or if it's difficult to find you, through me, you can find me in either my website or Facebook or Twitter.
Perfect. We have more questions. We have a question from Kana, who asked, "What is Asmahan doing today?"
Asmahan is doing well, and she is working in bringing her children
But
to.
do you
Her
want to say
estranged
where
children.
she is or not?
Sorry?
Do you
Sorry,
want to
her estranged children, are they back in her life?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome. We have another question that asks, "Will your book be available in other countries such as Greece, Syria, etc.?"
Greece.
It should be available in all the countries of Europe, but only in English. It's not been translated, but if you can find it in English language bookshop, you can get it. I don't know about in Syria.
For sure, not in Syria.
Yeah, not in Syria. No, it's not a free press.
We have another question from Emma Marie. She asked, she said, "What a powerful discussion. How did you find the interviewees, and what in particular made you want to include their specific stories?"
Well, we found them because they're in the camp, and some of them, I just met Eyad to start with, who introduced me to other people, because I just found them in a in a stationery shop and went up to him, and I heard him speaking English, and I just went up and said, "Hello, I'm Helen. Would you like some coffee?" and then we started to get to know each other, and he began to bring me people who wanted to talk about what life was in the camp, as he mentioned earlier. I found Evans, the gay refugee from Nigeria. I found him through the LGBTQ secret support group in the camp. Marcel, I found through, well, actually, she was a friend of Ehab's brother's friend. So, of Eyad's brother, Ehab, who got me in touch with Marcel. So it was sort of serendipitous, but we chose the people in the book for different reasons. One is sort of how willing they were to talk to us over all these months and months and years. Another was how good they were at telling their stories. Another was we wanted a representation of different countries and different ages and different religions and walks of life. So we have somebody from Cameroon, someone from Nigeria, someone from Afghanistan, 2 people from Syria. And then in the women's chapter, there are people from other countries too. But in the end, it was sort of just who would be the most open to us, I suppose, was the most important thing. As we said, there were others too we would have loved to include, but we didn't have room for.
Yeah, like Asmahan. I chose Asmahan because, I touched her passion by telling her story. And as I told you, she did not care about anything except telling the truth. And she was open.
Yeah.
And she wanted to.
She's amazingly open. Yeah. And Hassan too.
Yeah.
I know you.
One thing that happened, I think, that oddly to our advantage was COVID, because we did a lot of these interviews during COVID when we were all locked at home. And so there wasn't much else to do for people. So, like Hassan was locked up in not literally locked up, but he was under lockdown in a remote hotel, a refugee hotel. And no work. There was no NGO to volunteer with anymore, where he'd been very busy living in Samos, volunteering for a whole bunch of different NGOs. So he just would go, he had the time to go deep into his memories. And that was the case for several people.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned that it was, a bit difficult to just pick a few stories to share, and you wanted to share as much as you could about each person. And I feel like this book is definitely a stepping stone into hearing more stories from these refugees. So I think that's really cool. And Emma asked another question. She asked what I asked earlier. How long did it take to write the book? But I'm sure you can answer again.
We can say
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And everything also started when Helen was. I remember like the first time when I showed Helen my article, and she helped me to publish it. And she was working also on her own book, The Good Deeds. So yes, 4 years.
Yeah.
Then.
Wow. Again, thank you guys so much for having this conversation with us. It was really, really great. I'm so thankful that you guys were able to hop on, and Books and Books is so happy. And to the audience, thank you guys so much for your participation. It was just an overall great night. And yeah, I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day, wherever you guys are, because I know we're all worldwide right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
I'll be ending the broadcast now. Bye.
Bye.